killing me, Smalls.
To infinity and beyond!
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the What podcast. Woo! Yeah. I am Eric Creech. Eric Omack, for those of you who knew me on the AIM back in the day. Mm-hmm. And, of course, joined with Kyle Whitley and Ashby Brain. What's up, guys?
Hi.
I love that slight hesitation of Ashby Brain.
Yes. We don't ever really use her last name
That's
in conversation. I use your last name all the time because there's two Kyles in my life. I have to differentiate.
That's true.
There's
Ashby's unique enough you don't have
Ashby's
to.
like, Cher or Prince. Just one name is all you need.
Absolutely. I mean, Braim's not even my real last name, so.
Wait, what?
What?
Whoops.
What? We've been duped this
I
whole
hate to
time.
tell you, but you look too much like your parents to be adopted, so that's out of the question.
True story.
What's been going on, guys? This is our first time we've recorded since before Christmas. So what's going on?
Well, I went into this year with absolutely no plans, nothing to do, footloose, fancy free.
Footloose.
And as you well know, as we moved into, planning this year's seasons, I now have at least one thing to do every single month of this year, it seems like, and sometimes two or three things to do. I'm back into work travel. I'm back into personal travel. I booked a trip to Europe. I've got a bunch of other things, going on with traveling around. And I mean, it's great. No complaints, right? Getting back out there, adventuring in the wide, wide world. It's great. But man, it feels like my life is very full right now in a very good way. So
It's awesome.
I feel like if we hang around Ashby, we're finally going to travel.
Yeah.
Like, I know you've gone to Africa, but like...
Twice.
But I feel like at least we hang around her enough, especially like not just podcasting, if we actually like start hanging out, every once in a while.
Look, give it enough time.
Yeah.
One of my requirements for being friends with me is that you have to have a passport because we could go at any moment.
I have
So
one, but it expires in April.
I need to check mine.
definitely get that checked.
I don't know.
I'm definitely getting it renewed.
You got to be ready to go. You got to be ready to move at any time. And most countries want you to have a passport that does not expire until 6 months after you plan on leaving the country that you visited.
Well, that's good to know.
So it's not like, oh, well, I'm leaving in May and my passport's good till June. Like, they want you to have your passport good through the end of the year if
Which
you're going to be
makes sense.
traveling. Yeah.
Makes plenty of sense.
Yeah.
I've used mine on like cruises. And I feel like only one cruise was it ever necessity that I actually had it.
Right.
Most others are just like, oh, if you get sick in another country, if you have a passport, you can fly back in versus waiting to like arrive on the ship.
I keep mine on me at all times because I've seen way too many spy movies, and you got to be ready to go. You know what I'm
Watched
saying?
a lot of Taken.
Got a go bag. I got a go bag for sure. It's under the floorboards over there.
Yes. Awesome. Kyle?
I'm just excited. Like, I don't even know. Now all that happened so fast that my brain's not quite grasping. I was like,
We're not even sure if this is if Ashby's her real name at this point.
Honestly.
It has been since I've known her, like since we were little kids. And Brame has been a very solid like name established in the community since we were kids.
It's all a setup.
I've implanted my backstory in your mind.
This is like the deep undercover, the deep fake. I mean, this is
the
the
thing-
Americans, like from FX.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
But if it is like it's way beyond Ashby, like because her parents have been a part of this.
it goes
Because
I mean,
again,
did you
she's
guys
not
see the
adopted.
Black Widow
you know,
movie?
You know where it
That's
goes.
true.
It goes all the way to the
To
top.
the top.
Yeah,
The top of what? No, just to the top.
Yeah, just to the top. Don't worry about it.
I mean, her dad like runs a truck stop, a really really nice one.
It's like, but it's a hub.
It is.
It's a transportational hub.
In and out,
Who knows
very
what's
easy.
going through there?
I don't.
I mean, I don't either. They have a Taco Bell.
They have a Taco Bell and a Wendy's.
Neither does the
and a
DEA.
Subway.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Strike that from the record.
So when this episode airs
Please
on
strike that from the record. That's the last thing I need.
when this episode airs on March 28th, we're going to be under investigation.
Yeah, 100%.
Any of
It's
your
fine.
trips, get them done before March 28th.
Yeah, because I'm going to be
Wow.
on the do not fly list.
Yeah.
You're going to be randomly selected to be, like searched at every airport. Like, I've been searched 5 times. It's random, ma'am.
Yeah, it's definitely
right.
random.
Okay, you're right.
I was once told, because I didn't understand that, like I've only worked at one job that had random drug tests, and it happened every year on 421, and I looked at them, I was like, it's not very random if you're going to do it the day after 420. Like, that's kind of a good, solid guess. And then whenever it started happening, I was like, some of these people, I don't know if this is random. And they're like, well, usually it's just randomly we're doing it. It doesn't mean that we randomly drew everybody's name out of a hat. And I was like, I'll just go back to my desk.
Yeah.
These things it's above my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, above your pay grade.
Yeah. I don't handle the drugs. I don't know, but I haven't been doing a ton. Sky's, our little girl is almost 9 months old now next week, which is insane.
She driving yet? Going to college?
She at least drives her little car on the floor, like doesn't go anywhere. She just sits and honks the horn with her face.
That's
So,
right.
Yes.
But
Look, who among us hasn't honked a horn with our face before?
For sure.
You know,
Let's hear those stories.
yeah,
you got a
This
burger
is-
in one hand, you got a drink in the other hand. You're
Yeah.
steering with your knee. You know, you got to shift with your elbow.
somebody cut
This,
you off.
this season is
headbutt
what the what
steering wheel.
Yeah.
after dark.
Yeah. But no, things are going really well. Erica had COVID last week, so I'm good and in the clear. Everything's going well. Thankfully that wasn't a big issue. It was more so just like a cold with lingering tiredness. So
Yeah, I ended up having to test when I came back because I went on my work trip to New York and just for safety precautions and
Sure.
for my own, well-being, like
Right.
to just feel better about it. I ended up testing, so I was fine. But yeah, I guess that's the caveat to going back out into the world is that, but it is what it is.
I've just been excited. We had a brief meeting the other weekend, and we were talking about the like vloggers that we watch or I watch going to Disney and Universal, and we even like talked about possibly next year really trying to make some plans to maybe go to Universal. We got some big plans coming up for this year. Maybe we won't announce quite yet because it's not a solid 100% thing yet, but definitely.
They're in the works.
Yeah, we may actually have our first public appearance. Like, that sounds, lame because you probably don't really, we're a podcast, but we're getting out there. We're trying things.
Working on it.
Yeah, so it's exciting.
Well, we're not officially under our social media, and I guess we have a website. We're not What the What podcast. We're What the What media.
True.
And media encompasses all things, including video appearances and maybe a book one day, like a children's book would be great.
I've gotten ideas for that too, because now that we're reading more children's books versus the other, it reminded me I liked children's books where it's real life things that you took a picture of and then put it in there. Sesame Street used to do that instead of just cartoon Sesame Street characters. It was like pictures of the puppets, and then the words or whatever. It's like that's easier than drawing something.
If we are going to get into the children's literary game, I feel like we should have like a collection of books that feature the three of us, but as like animals. Like little children's like animals, and like we don't have to be in each other's like all the books all together all the time, but we can be like supporting characters for like the main character, who would be Ashby, obviously.
Sure.
As a panther.
As a panther.
I'm definitely
Or
a
not
panther.
Panther, panda.
I like to think
Puma.
you're like
Puma.
the modern day like Carmen Sandiego, where you're traveling, but there's also something a little suspect going on.
Yes.
So like maybe I'm a jaguar with a red hat.
Ooh.
Maybe. See, I like that
We
idea.
need to get this idea down before this episode airs so they don't steal it. I don't know who they is, but that they're listening.
Oh, they're definitely listening.
I still like the idea of us each
Probably
getting,
in Missouri.
getting like puppets made for ourselves, and that's what we'll use like for these type of things instead of
Yes.
having to figure out somebody to draw.
We looked into creating puppets for me and you.
Oh, I've looked. I found a
And,
guy.
What, $1,000 each, or
You could probably get a little cheaper than that.
Okay, I'm going to be really honest. Are you guys ready for this?
You have a puppet of yourself?
No, I feel like
that-
we've had one or two of these moments in our friendship before. I
You're scared of puppets.
don't do puppets or Muppets. Puppets or Muppets.
That's right.
I can do people dressed in full costumes like mascots, but the only puppet Muppet thing I've ever been able to stomach was Labyrinth, and that was because of David Bowie. They freak me out the way they move. I can't.
Is
I
Labyrinth
can't.
the one? I mean, I know what Labyrinth is, but the scary like vulture.
Yes. Yes.
I saw that as a child. Sorry, this is not today's topic
and
at
it
all.
has
Not
like the
at all.
Firebirds and their heads pop off and roll.
Well, this was the one where like there was one, and I guess he did. It's been so long as I've seen it, but he did something wrong, and like the whole clan like pretty much pecked him to death. Like he didn't
Right.
die.
Oh, yeah.
But
I don't think that's Labyrinth.
that's
but
some
I do
other
know what
movie
you're talking about.
where like he's like they're all like, and it was
Yeah.
creepy, and they're like,
Yeah.
I'm like hunching, like you can
Yes.
see me right now, you can't, but they end up pretty much like
I just can't. I
all
can't
the
do
feathers
it.
and everything are gone.
I can't do puppets.
So what I'm hearing is we need full blown costumes now. So
okay,
mascot costumes.
Yeah.
kind of like the 90's Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah.
I know a guy who can buy those
like
too.
a furry situation,
Yeah.
but not weird.
No, these are
But
like
not
full
weird.
blown.
No shaming,
Caveat.
but
This is full blown Jim Henson
but not
style.
weird.
Yeah, not to yuck anyone's yum, but
Yeah.
not my
not
thing.
weird.
No.
Let's move on. So everyone's doing good from
end
what
it
I hear.
there.
Yeah, this was your idea.
Yeah, how are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing good. Thank y'all for asking.
Great.
Doing great. Life is
Great.
good. So
I feel like we're all in a really good place.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
think so. Life is
it's a good start of the year.
Good start.
I feel like there's always that break where there's like part of me that's like, are we going to get back together?
Right.
We may not.
It's like the Beatles for every album past like the third album. Is it going to happen?
Somebody puts that initial effort into it, and we're like, oh yeah, we love this. Let's do this.
Yeah.
But until that moment happens, it's like somebody's going to do
It's good to
this.
know that we all have similar thoughts. I also have those thoughts, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to bring it up this time. I'm going to let them bring it up. And I think it was Ashby this time who brought it up.
Yes.
But like that gives me the confidence, like, okay, well, next time I'll just speak up, and that'll get everyone excited again.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's part of it too. If we get together, it happens.
it does.
It's the sitting around
Well,
like maybe
it's-
we'll do something soon, and then we can text all we want.
It's
but-
the concept of how this podcast got started. We talked about it for 2 years.
Sure.
Right.
We finally got together and did it.
Don't talk about it. Be about it. That's right.
Our whole text conversation pretty much is just memes at this point.
Right.
Where it's I don't really have
yeah.
anywhere else to send
Yeah.
them to, so like I'm always
Yeah,
like
we're literally
I can send this to them.
conversating in pictures
All
as
the
a
time.
friend group.
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That's how deep our relationship goes.
like Egyptians, just hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics
Yes.
with modern day memes.
Modern day, yeah.
And because of that, randomly Facebook, of course, now gives me all of the Harry Potter like funny memes and all the things.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
you saved this one picture one time. Here's 20.
Yeah, pretty much with Facebook,
Love
I
it.
don't get any information on my friends anymore. It's just, hey, here's another meme website,
Yeah.
and some reels because you watched a reel one time.
that one time.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one time you watched the reel from John's Financial Tips,
That's right.
and now you get all the financial tips from people not named John. So,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into it. Thanks for joining us on today's episode. This is the first episode of the 9 on the 90 season.
Yeah.
Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And, of course, rate and review us. Now, this is important because I went through the other day and looked at our ratings on Apple. Someone did not rate us 5 stars. They rated us 3 stars.
Okay. That's okay.
No, it's not.
I'm okay with that.
We accept
Rude.
5 stars.
Well, do they have an explanation?
No, that was the thing. No explanation. So, like, if you're going to give us 3 stars, let us know how bad we are in the comments.
Yeah, I'd take that.
Yeah.
We'll take it. We want to improve.
Yeah, we
But
understand.
don't hide behind your star rating. Acknowledge your star rating and stand by it.
Right. Yeah. If you're going to be critical, like at least give us some.
Yeah, give us criticism.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Wow.
but we prefer 5-star ratings.
Clarify,
only.
we're very much not all caught up in
No,
ourselves.
we're really not.
That's why I'm okay with
to
3.
look.
Yeah,
happened
but
to look at it like, wait a minute, what 3 stars? I'm going to talk about this.
Who is this? I'm hunting them down.
Don't even know who it is. It was anonymous. So please,
Even
also,
worse, you can't admit what you did.
it's the internet for you.
If I'm going to leave a Google review, you're going to know I reviewed it.
We're going
Wow.
on Yelp.
I'm not going to leave a picture of it, but I'm at least going to put my name.
That's right. I'm going to talk about your bad service on Yelp and give you 1 star. Anyway, please also follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram at What the What Media. As always, it is.
All one word.
And find us on Twitter at WTW_media. Now, I mentioned earlier, this is the first episode of our new season, 9 on the 90s.
Which I will continue to call the 90s on 9.
Yes.
Because of a
Because of
certain
the-
radio
yes.
that
That
runs
word-
with Mysterious.
Yes, that we're not affiliated
In
with
any
at
way.
all. So,
That my old car doesn't care for. But the previous car, they would call you like once every couple of months. You sure you don't want to renew?
I get emails and letters in the mail all the time from, all of them like, hey, you listen to this during your free trial. Like, don't you want to buy it now? It's like, no, I have Spotify. I pay for that. So,
Exactly.
I have Apple Music.
I actually also have Apple Music, and I don't pay for that, but I don't like their playlist, and they don't have as many good podcasts. Anyway,
To be fair, I think they pay their artists more.
they do.
I looked it up one time.
They do.
Because I have a
They pay
musician
them like
friends
a
that
half
said
a
it.
cent more, I think.
Yep, that adds up.
It does. So 9 on the 90s. This is our season. We are all children. Technically, we're children of the 80s, but we identify as 90s kids because we grew up.
We were kids in the 90s.
We were kids in the 90s. I didn't turn 13 until 2000, so I wasn't a teenager until. Well, no, 1999 was when I turned 13. Anyway, so for most of the 90s, I was a child.
Yeah.
very excited about this season. Just a couple of, we have 9 episodes because we want to keep the seasons kind of condensed. But when we were going through the planning process, there's so much out there that we could have done episodes on for the 90s. We might have to do a part 2 at some point. Because we left out some good stuff, but we feel like we have a pretty good mixture of episodes that are coming your way. We have, I believe, 3 movies. We've got a couple of television shows. We got a couple of music-related episodes. We're doing a Nickelodeon game show episode. Just a good variety overall, I would say. So, how do y'all feel about the 90s and our season?
I'm really excited because I feel like especially like doing the research we've been doing lately, I realized how much I identify with so much of the 90s and how it did make me who, I'm not completely like, it made me who I am, but at the same time,
The 90s raised me.
there's so much of it that when you think back on good times, it's because of things in the 90s that I automatically go back to. Style-wise, like colors pop in my mind that are completely from the 90s. Like you either say lime green or like neon orange. It's like, Nickelodeon. Like,
Lisa Frank.
exactly. Like there's so many things that pop up now that you automatically are like, my childhood.
Yeah.
Like that's my childhood because of these colors.
You merely adopted the 90s. We were born in it, molded by it.
That's right. That's
Technically,
right.
we're born in the 80s and
Well,
rolled
I mean,
into
I
the
feel like
90s.
it's fair to say 80s babies, 90s kids.
100%.
You know,
Truth.
like I was born in 1988.
Yeah.
I have no concept of like the 80s pop culturally except for things that I've experienced in retrospect because you can't really say that you were a member of the 80s generation if you were born the last 2 years of the decade, you know?
I was
So,
born in
like,
87. I feel like anything that was big for me from 87 to 90 is because it kept going and I found it in the
Correct.
90s. So.
Correct. Like 90s were when we started having like experiences and
Right.
interacting with pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm really excited. I also feel like, I mean, there's just maybe we go into every year feeling this way because of how things are cranked out these days and how much is being redone and reimagined and re-whatevered. But I just feel like it, like going into this year feels like a really great time to be a millennial because there's
sure.
so much pop culture
Lots of nostalgia
that's
out there.
happening this year. And so I feel like it's a great tie-in because I feel like we're not just going backwards for the sake of going backwards. I feel like we're covering Jurassic Park in this season, which was
1993.
93 film, and they're about to wrap up their second trilogy, and it looks like it's going to be
Well, they're reuniting the
Yes.
original
From 93.
cast from 93 in
nuts.
this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's going to be like the ultimate like closing of like this world in a sense that like everyone's coming back for this sort of last chapter. And then, we had talked about before we went on the air about the Super Bowl halftime show.
We can't say Super Bowl. The Nooper Knoll.
Rhymes with
Looper
Looper
Lowell.
Shoal, whatever.
We're not getting
Halftime
sued
show.
by the NFL this
That's
year.
right.
Can't say NFL.
Not again.
Crap.
You can't say it.
This is why we have no money.
Anyhow,
Can't say money. They'll take it.
That thing that happened on Sunday that was important.
During the American Football National
Go
Championship.
sports.
Sports ball.
I feel like that was a big moment for millennials and for music, and it just feels like a really good time to be having a 9 on 90 season for us going into 2022. So I'm really excited about it.
Absolutely. If you haven't, check out our previous season where we did holiday season, Halloween and Christmas themed episodes back in the fall of 2021. And then we also have 100 other episodes of the What the What podcast in the archives. Something for everybody, and we're just getting started. So tonight, our episode is one of, I think, the listeners, their genre of choice. They love our music episodes. They constantly get the most downloads, according to our data. So we're opening up with another music episode. This is the 90's Mixtape episode. First of all, before we get into this, who wants to explain to those people who are under 20, 25 even, what a mixtape is?
Very simply, it's a playlist, but I don't feel like for us, there may have been brief moments in our lives where we made mixtapes, and I'm sure we did maybe once or twice, maybe more depending, but we more so got into the burnt CDs era by the time we were old enough to really kind of be doing some things.
When we do our 2000 seasons, we'll talk about the burn CD for sure.
Whole episode on Napster and LimeWire. But it's pretty much back in the day for a mixtaping in general, like you had to sit and wait for a song to play on the radio, and you had to be ready and like sitting waiting for as soon as it started to record on a blank tape you had in your cassette player to record that song. And so you would wait and want certain songs, you know, and some people you just put it all together, but for the proper person, they had it all planned out. I want this here, there's a theme to what I'm doing. So you would spend a lot of time waiting for that perfect thing, having your tape set right at the right moment to record these things. And you didn't want to get the DJ talking over it. You didn't want him cutting in and short after, because that happens sometimes too. You know, we didn't have our phones first in general. We didn't have cell phones, but you didn't have as easy of access as you do now to music to just jump in and download things. Or just if you want to hear this, hey, Siri or Alexa or whatever, like play this song. We didn't have that option. So for us, we're putting together what we think, and correct me, I feel like we all kind of came at it with a different feeling a little bit, but some of the top songs of the 90s that made the 90s what they are, and put it on a mixtape.
Yeah, there's really the main theme here is just 90s music. What do we think defined 90s music? There is a caveat here. We are doing a boy bands and girl bands episode later this season. So for the most part, I know I did. I think Ashby did too. We intentionally avoided Backstreet Boys, NSYNC,
Spice Girls.
I mean, I still have the Spice Girls,
I
but
put
still,
them out.
But intentionally avoided, you know, for the most part,
Right.
Because they are going to get an in-depth look later this season. So when you hear the songs, you know, where's "I Want It That Way"?
Right.
Yes, we agree.
Where's Bop?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is iconic and
Yeah.
should be on any 90s themed playlist.
Right.
But the reason it's not here is because we're dedicating a whole episode. I mean, I put in our notes here. I don't think Kyle has seen it. I don't know if but I literally put, screw it. We're going to have to do a boy bands,
right.
girl bands mixtape too, aren't we?
Sure.
100%. There's so much.
And then maybe even a one-hit wonder mixtape too, because
Right.
there's a lot of one-hit wonders in the 90s too. So
I feel like 90s was this very weird crossing over point for music, right? Because towards the end of the decade, you started to have what would eventually become known as streaming, and some especially like illegal streaming. So like Napster, LimeWire, things like that
Kazaa.
started
I was about
to
to say.
pop up moving into the 2000s. And so it really, like that model of, you know, record company to radio to consumer was going to start being very interrupted as it had historically been known. And going into the 90s, I mean, you're coming out of the 80s, right? Which is, you know, hair bands, synth pop,
big
stuff
sound,
like that. Big sound.
big orchestrated sound that's
Yes.
really over the top.
Yes.
And the 90s kind of starts that way
Right. Yes.
before it kind of dies into more subdued.
Right.
Like, this is who we are. Like, it's not necessarily big and loud.
Right.
But it's meaningful. It's impactful. It's hard to really describe. I'm sorry, I cut you off. But
no, it's fine. I think you're right. I think you start the decade with this movement from what had traditionally been like what we now understand as classic rock into a more alt rock scene, which was in its own way like loud and brash, but was also much more in a way like introspective and thoughtful, and was not as flashy and glam rock, but more like grunge rock. You had scenes coming out of Seattle and underground stuff. You had the Riot Girl scene moving out of the 80s. And then you started to have sort of hip hop.
I was going to say the
leading into
the birth of rap, and well, not really the
rap.
birth, but rap and hip hop really became prominent in the early to mid 90s.
Right,
And
right.
there was still a a scene for it before that, but it became mainstream.
Right.
With Dr. Dre, with Tupac, with Snoop Dogg. Just
Right.
so
East
many
versus West.
Yeah, East Coast versus West Coast.
Right.
NWA. I'm leaving off the NWA.
Right.
Ice Cube, Ice T. I mean, just so many great. I was telling Kyle and you earlier this week, I could literally pick 5 great hip hop rap songs, and it would be a fantastic list.
Right.
And
You
but it
also
would
have-
leave out so much.
Right. You also
other good
have
things.
like, and you have always had stuff coming out of Europe, but I feel like the 90s was also the continuation of the sound. And there's actually a really fascinating documentary on it. And now I'm not going to remember the name of it. But, you know, it started with ABBA. And now we sort of take for granted that all the good music producers and songwriters come out of Sweden. And like if you think of like Dr. Luke, which is a really bad example, but
Yes.
Who's the other guy who helps produce like Adele and Gaga and wrote a lot? Max Martin.
Yes.
He wrote a lot with Britney and the Backstreet Boys. And so you started to have this these one-hit wonders that were synth pop that were coming, like think about like Ace of Base and some others who's the Cardigans. And then you had Irish bands like the Cranberries and it just like, it was such a different, weird, lilting,
Literally, it was like
odd sound.
musical collage.
Yes.
Where you literally could throw almost anything up there
Right.
on the canvas.
Right.
And something is going to stand out on its own.
Like, honestly,
we
I
could
think-
all look at the same musical picture.
Yes,
And
yes.
find a favorite part of the 90s music.
Right.
And we would come up with different things.
And I think being a 90s baby is maybe one of the reasons that my musical taste is so eclectic because nothing went together. It didn't have to.
No one sounded the same.
Right.
You know, and that's one of my main criticism. I mean, I'm going to sound like an old fart now because just like our parents before us and their parents before us,
Right.
I really can't stand music
Right.
today
Music
because I
these
feel like it
days, yeah.
sounds the same.
Yeah.
I feel like it's all like
Right.
just generated under like the same like little
Right.
template.
But
And I know it's not, but
Right.
but
Right.
in the 90s I felt like it was literally it was anybody's show.
Right.
And nothing sounded the same. Everything was unique. Everything stood out on its own and
Right.
had a message behind it that someone could identify with.
Right.
But there's also, you've got this point where too, like I listen to the radio every once in a while now. Like I don't all the time, but like if I don't have my phone hooked up, I'll listen to the radio. And there's those few moments that like is a flashback for me to be like, I remember listening to the radio all the time and having DJs and having them talk about new records coming out or this new song premiering. Like you don't hear that as much now.
You really don't.
Right.
And I'm sure there's stuff that still happens, but we just don't listen to it as often. But a big thing, like you mentioned, like with what became known as like the grunge movement was people that weren't doing this to be famous. You had people that just, I'm playing music that I love and I want to do. It was good enough that it got out to the public, that the public loved it enough that the next, record companies are like, this is what we've got to do now. So we're going to jump here,
Right.
make this huge.
Right.
And you had a lot of artists that struggled with becoming so big because they never intended it to be.
Absolutely.
Like they come out of, places that weren't so much in the, you mentioned a little bit, but you had artists that were not aiming, they were writing what meant something to them and was very passionate to them. They weren't writing, I got to do this so it'll be on the radio.
Right.
And I feel like because of that, the same way we did have a wide span of music growing up, because if you talk 90s, you've got to talk about grunge and everything that switched and beat Michael Jackson on the Billboard coming out of the 80s and everything. All your hair metal and stuff is fading out because that's no longer cool because this is cool now. To growing into all the wild genres that come out of this. I
Right.
talked with Michael at work because we used to, we grew up together and did a lot with music with each other, and we talked about it. And it's like you could have a billion different 90s playlists because, not even, we have yet to even mention like 90s country music.
Yeah.
Was
Oh, man.
huge.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and it's its own thing as well, and how that became. And you come around too where you were still recording to tape. Back in the day, computers just were starting to be something that people would have access to.
Mm-hmm.
Some people were using it for crazy things or whatever, but like you were using it now where you could save your art and your stuff to a computer, and it was easier access. And as you progress closer to the 2000s, it's easier again. Like And I do feel you fall into, like you're talking about with modern stuff, you still have always had radio music that have producers or people behind it that push to say, we need this to make money.
Right.
And this is what we need. But the same way, I think it falls in and out some where it is rounds of that. There's still music out there, but I think, too, we're in a situation where we used to have to rely on radio to hear these things.
We relied
don't now.
We relied on, excuse me, we relied on radio, but also MTV and CMT.
Sure.
I don't know when they debuted. I think TV was in the 80s. But it hit it big in the 90s.
TRL wasn't around to the 90s.
100%.
Yeah.
And you'd rush home to watch TRL.
You'd rush home to watch TRL, or for me, you would go to school and listen to what was on TRL the day before.
I feel like that was one of the first times that, like, radio disc jockeys had always sort of, by getting to select for the most part what they played, they got to tell you what you should be interested in. TRL was the first time that, like, someone came into your living room and is like, you need to be listening to this. You know?
And you got to vote on it. Now, I'm sure there were some rigged things behind it, probably. It's television, but still.
But you got to vote on it, and, you know, there's really, the equivalent to, like, MTV today is basically YouTube. But you have to seek out YouTube music videos because you don't get it on television now. I mean, I'm sure you do, but that was the big, you know, that music was so big in the 90s because of the rise of cable television and MTV and CMT behind it.
And you would stay up late into the night waiting for certain videos to come on, like certain music videos and stuff to come on. It made me think in the middle of this, I started searching up, and, like, there's movies that if you did not grow up in this era, like, you know, before this or whatever, if you're after this time period, if you go back and watch now, it's not going to make a ton of sense to you. Like, I think of Empire Records, where there's a giant record store, and I know they still exist. Like, record stores still happen because vinyl's making its whole other comeback and things, which is awesome, and I think it's great. But again, a lot of that talks about what certain things are playing on certain stations and everything else. You have the movie Airheads, where you've got three rockers that come in, first they just want their tape played on the radio, and they do all these stupid things, finally get there. They end up shutting the whole place down on security lock because all they wanted was their tape played by this one radio station. Turns into a giant mess because of that. But you see the backside of that and how those things work. And then, like, Josie and the Pussycats was a movie that very much shows you this, but then also makes fun of itself and shows the behind the scenes of, like, record labels want this, so they're going to subliminally put this in records. Or songs in the background for you to be like, oh, orange is totally the new pink. I hate my pink shoes. I want orange shoes. And, like, I want to drink this and that. And I remember seeing that, and they're in a record store or CD store that reminded me of, like, a Sam Goody or whatever else that we got to experience in, or FYE.
Or
where you would go
CD
and
Warehouse.
listen. Yeah, and, like, they'd have a little thing on the side wall with headphones where the new albums were there. You could listen to it and stand there all day if you wanted to and listen to this new album on the headphones in the store. In the same way that record companies would be paying these people to be, like, push these new songs over your sound and, like, to sell records and how they did things. And it's entertaining for me to go back and look at it. If you didn't experience it, go back and watch it. But
I'm actually really glad that we can't take credit for this, but actually Eric can take credit for it.
I will.
That we planned it this way because I feel like the 90s music movement, you know, from 90 to like 98 is what we have been talking about. And then you get to 98. And as you start moving into the 2000s, the last 2 years of the decade, that's when boy band mania hit. And it becomes an entirely different music
everything
scene.
does.
Everything does.
Everything
Rock changes.
changed.
You have new metal for the they have Limp Bizkit and
Eminem's
Korn.
out at that
It's
point.
almost
rap.
like the
I mean,
last year of the 90s, like, is indistinguishable from like the early 2000s.
Rap and hip hop evolves into R&B at that point. With Usher.
I'm just
R.
glad
Kelly.
that we put boy bands and girl bands in a separate episode, because when I started trying to think about what 90 songs I wanted on this episode, they were all boy and girl bands because I was, for better or for worse, you know, an impressionable young preteen moving out of the 90s. And so I forgot how musically diverse that era was, and all the different songs I was listening to, like through the radio and through my parents and through MTV to a certain extent. But the second that pop craze hit and I was being marketed to directly as a music consumer, for years, like, I was like, I didn't listen to anything else except NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and 98 Degrees and O-Town. Like, I was obsessed. And it took a while for me to come out of that. And I think that is a very unique point in time musically, especially for the people who are our age, especially to a certain extent for girls, because they figured out that they could market directly to us to a certain extent for the first time ever. And it was nuts. It was nuts.
Well, I would love to do an episode or something in the future too, like on that time period for us, because that was our lives. Late 90s into the early mid 2000s is, because as you said, going back to make this list, I thought immediately this is going to be easy. I love music of the 90s. Excuse me. But then you realize how vast this is.
Right.
And then, like you say, there's that period of music as we were becoming teenagers that, or, around that age anyway, that were huge and important moments for us. And that actually falls in the late 90s, which I didn't realize for some things. And there's some albums that I was like, oh, no way. But wait, hold on a second. It came out in 97.
Yeah,
so,
or
yeah,
98.
actually I did.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And so in that time period.
Like looking this stuff up, I was like, what?
Yeah.
So I tried to avoid putting those in because, again, it's...
Right. Because then
it
when I
almost
realized...
feels
so
different
big,
for
it's
us.
getting its own episode.
I know, because when I realized I didn't want to include boy and girl band stuff because that was a whole thing for me and we're doing a whole nother episode on it, then I thought, well, I'll just pick 5 songs that I think define the 90s and that I love and have listened to, but maybe don't necessarily define the 90s for me, but that I feel like speak to. But even that, it's so musically diverse. I was like, 5 songs that, like, just 5 songs that I think define the. I'm so interested to see what we all came up with.
Yes.
It's going to be tough.
It is. And not to, we can go into this conversation a little more with the boy band, girl band episode, but that's an era where the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC coexisted with Korn and Limp Bizkit. And here's a hot take.
Nuts.
They're all boy bands.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Like, honestly, I think TLC's a girl band.
Well, the same way you talked about it, how it marketed straight to you, they marketed it to us because there's in that time period, it was marketed to boys to hate those things. And then they marketed us the harder other side of things to love this instead.
Well,
Right.
that's
like Papa Roach was like the antithesis of a boy
Backstreet
band.
Boys and NSYNC were marketed towards girls. Korn and Limp Bizkit were marketed towards boys.
Right.
But it was the same concept.
Yeah.
Just marketed like the same
Oh,
way
yeah.
Pepsi Zero
Right.
and Diet Pepsi. They're not the same thing, but Pepsi Zero is marketed to men because they don't want to be caught drinking diet stuff. And
Right.
Diet Pepsi is marketed towards older women.
Right.
So
It makes sense.
it does. So that was a great explanation. I didn't even get asked the question. Explain 90s music. Why is it special and unique? We just went into a 20-minute
it.
monologue there of why it's special and unique. So let's go into what songs made the cut. And the criteria here is very simple. All songs must have made their debut in the 90s to be eligible. So, and I checked over and everything has.
Seems fair.
So we're going to start with Kyle. And Kyle, how do you want me? You want to play the song and then you talk about it, or do you want to intro it?
Let me talk for a second about it because I told Eric and them the other day, honestly, I don't necessarily love my list. But the easiest way for me to put it together for myself was because, again, there's tons of songs that mean a lot to me, but I try to think of it as if I'm telling somebody else that's never listened to any 90s music, I tried to go with what are big albums of the 90s that made a difference or changed things. So the first thing that came to mind for me is Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit off the album Nevermind, because this is the one song that once it was heard changed the world, and it toppled Michael Jackson on the charts. It changed everything that we knew of hair metal, everything else, and it's just iconic. And I was talking to Michael again at work because we both got into this at the same time. I don't even really care for this song anymore. I was the biggest Nirvana fan ever, in high school or middle school. This was the first rock thing I got into, so I owned every CD. It's all I ever listened to. But at the same time, you heard Smells Like Teen Spirit so many times that it's a song now that you're like, there's other ones. Lithium comes on, I'm going to listen to Lithium. This or Come As You Are, I'm probably going to turn I don't really care as much. But I had to put this one on the list because this is the song that changed everything. This is the song that when I was in middle school, heard it and was like, what is this?
Right.
My only other, we briefly, and I'm not going to go long on it, but we had discussed previously before we started recording, like growing up listening to oldies and everything else my mom listened to. I remember listening to Aerosmith as the first rock band I listened to because of Dude Looks Like a Lady on Mrs. Doubtfire. Mm-hmm. But I remember hearing this in, I don't remember, late 90s, mid to late 90s, I guess, at this point in middle school. I bought the CD off of Andrew McCartan, who brought it. It was his brother's CD. He brought his brother's CD to school to me. I listened to it on a portable CD player in my backpack to make sure, like, this isn't broken, it's going to work. And I paid him like $20 for a CD. I probably could have gone to the store and bought a brand new one. But I had this like secret thing, and I remember being pumped on it to be like, I cannot wait. This is going to be the first band I ever see live. And then I found out Kurt Cobain had died like 5 years before.
Oh, wow.
And so like it was a big ordeal to me, but it changed my life. It's like the first song I ever learned on guitar, everything else. So as a kid that had already come and gone as far as Nirvana itself, it brought in a whole genre that changed music, and like especially rock, but all around in that time period. So that song has to be included on the list.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm not even a big Nirvana kind of guy, but honestly, when I hear the song, the title, like I know it's an iconic song, but I don't ever place it in my mind until I hear that opening guitar riff. And I'm like, oh, I know this song.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those, like, you know, when you see a movie and you're like, okay, who's this guy? I've heard this name before. And it seems like, oh, that guy.
Yeah.
That is, that song.
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
I'm definitely a surface level grunge fan.
Yeah.
But I will say, I feel like music a lot of times is defined by just how it makes you feel.
100%.
And this song, even as like a 33-year-old adult woman who's never really had any reason to be that angry with the world, when this song comes on and I hear that opening guitar riff, I want to throw something. Just to throw it, just to watch it smash against a wall. Like that sound just makes me want to rage, and like in a really good way, you know. And I love that song because of that.
Well, let's get to my first song, and this is a song that, I mean, I'm not really sure how to like really go into describing my picks other than this is 90s for me. When I think of the 90s, this was absolutely the first song I thought about. So there's a reason it made the list when we're still talking about boy bands and girl bands in a different episode. It had to make this list. This is Wannabe by the Spice Girls. And you talk about a song that just makes you want to just jump up and dance.
Yeah.
Or, I mean,
absolutely.
Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
I mean, even right now, we're just kind of moving around. We're just kind of jamming to it. I mean, that's all I can really say about this song. It's just like when I hear it, it transports me back in time. Okay, the Spice Girls, let's just nod our heads. If you want to be my lover, you got to get with my friends. I mean,
that's
it's
right.
Just, those are basic life principles. So,
girl power.
One thing that's funny to me, though, is as we said a few minutes ago, as boys in this time period, we weren't supposed to like this.
Oh, no,
Correct.
we weren't.
Right.
And if you asked us in public, we would have said, no, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Hanson is a perfect example.
Right.
Like, Hanson was the first one to come through, and we're like, I hate Hanson, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
Them and their stupid blonde hair. And
But
the
somehow
drummer
you
and-
still knew
Yeah.
all the lyrics to Mbop or Mbop, and the same way you know all
For
the lyrics
sure.
to this, and Backstreet Boys and NSYNC.
For sure.
We'll dive deeper some other time on the other episode. But
oh no, I cannot wait for the other episode. I have a Baby Spice Barbie doll that's
Nice.
never been opened.
Oh, snap.
It's still in the packaging.
she's going to let her breathe for the
And
first
I
time on the
own
episode.
Spice World on DVD, and
I've
I
never
watch
watched
it
it.
like once a year. It's delightful. We should watch it.
I would love to.
As a podcast, and like I can live tweet you guys watching it for the first time because
Mm-hmm.
when I say you would love it, it is one of the most underrated comedies.
I would absolutely love to watch
It's hysterical. It's so good.
I'm down. Don't threaten me with a good time. No. So we've got Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit. I've got Wannabe by the Spice Girls. Ashby, what's your first song?
Okay, so my first song, you know, like again, I had to start out with that heavy pop that the 90s, the pop is what the 90s means to me personally. It's what I was listening to. It's what I was begging my parents to buy for me. I've since, you know, grown the branches of my 90s music tree as I've gotten older. But if you took a peek backwards into like, you know, 10, 11-year-old Ashby's bedroom, this is 100% what she was listening to. And trying to look like, and trying to dress like. Yeah. I remember this music video. Melissa Joan Hart was in it. It was like along with the You Drive Me Crazy movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once again, as a boy, I wasn't supposed to like Britney Spears.
You can't not like it gets in your head. It's so catchy.
Talk about TLC from before. I remember coming into school and then be like, we gotta go home and like vote Faith by Limp Bizkit as number one. Did you vote yesterday? It's like 100% did. He's gonna make it to the top. But I actually voted for Hit Me Baby One More Time by Britney Spears, but I'm not telling you that. Like I called him.
So this album, I left this album in my dad's truck one day because I had, I was going riding with him somewhere. And of course I insisted we listen to it. And I left it in there and like it stayed in there for like a whole week. And I remember him giving it back to me and just like for the next week, I would catch him like humming Britney Spears under his breath. His favorite was there was a song on that album called Soda Pop.
Soda Pop, yes.
He could not stop. I mean,
so catchy.
It's so catchy, and like I would hear him humming Soda Pop under his breath.
So when I was late to the CD game. I got this big CD player for Christmas, like in '98 or '99.
That's first off, too, something that kids like that are younger now don't understand having a giant CD player or boombox.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember going over to Jerry Naren's house, and, I only had like 3 CDs. I had the Space Jam soundtrack. I had an Eagles double live. I might have had Bob Seger's greatest hits because, I enjoyed Bob Seger for some reason.
You were an old soul.
I was an old soul.
A good saxophone.
But I didn't really have many CDs. And so I went to Jerry's house and he's like, you can borrow some of my CDs. So I borrowed like some of I going through his CD case and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Chumbawamba. Cool. I like Tough Thumping. All right. All right, let's grab this. And I see it, the Britney Spears CD. And I look around. He's not around. I grab it, put it in my stack. And like 3 months later, he calls me. He's like, did you borrow my Britney Spears CD?
Nah, man, don't know.
Like,
what happened to
that? What are you talking about? He's like, I can't seem to find it. I was like, wait, you listen to Britney Spears? He's like, no. My mom's looking for it.
That's a great cover up to be like, why would I have your CD?
My mom's looking for it.
I was like, look, maybe it got mixed in with my CDs, and I finally like gave it back to him. I was like, sorry, I don't know how it got here, man, but I enjoyed 6 great months of listening to that
Mysteries
album.
of Life.
Yep.
So good. Man, Britney Spears.
Well, instead of chasing Britney Spears, what should we be chasing, Kyle?
We should be chasing Waterfalls by TLC. Again, I have a sister that's 5 years older than me, so there's a point that her music genre and things that she listened to had an effect on me. I didn't have a CD player, didn't have anything. She had a portable CD player, and I remember listening to this CD nonstop until the batteries would die in that portable CD player. And not just this one song, but the whole album by TLC. And there's just something about it that was completely different than the oldies and beach music that I had listened to growing up because of my mom or random rock music. And it just had a giant effect on me as a kid, like getting into a wider variety of music that I never listened to. So, Waterfalls by TLC.
Y'all know y'all want to sing this next part, right? Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. I know that you're gonna have it your way or nothing at all, but I think you're moving too fast.
Oh, man. Like,
Y'all don't hear me.
talking about like misheard lyrics.
Oh,
Go
for sure.
Jason Waterfalls. I was like, what is he,
Go-Go?
Captain Planet or something?
For
sure.
Go Jason Waterfalls.
The Bart
Can that be a book in our What the What series?
the Bart Simpson parody version of the song "Don't Go Chasing Phony Calls." Please stick to the 7 digits or area codes and 7 digits that you're used to.
Also, there was 100% a radio edit of that song, and I didn't realize that there was a version that had Left Eye's rap. Like, I didn't realize
Oh, yeah, it's
that
really
she
good.
rapped in it because I'd always just heard the radio version until, like, streaming, Spotify, whatever came along where I could get the album version of it. And I was jamming, and she came in with that rap, and I was like, what is this? My God, it's good.
I remember listening to it as like this chubby little white kid, and I'm like, "What is this?" I'm like, I had the biggest crush ever on Left Eye, and again,
Oh, yeah.
all I had was the CD booklet to go off of to be like, oh, this is what she looks like.
Right.
Oh man, listen to that. That's really cool. How's she doing this? And like, I had this giant secret crush on her
Right.
for like the longest
Oh, yeah.
time because of this. It
And
just
I
changed
love
me.
learning raps, and there are rappers that I can't even begin to like keep up with, but I like learning like just little rap parts and songs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one rap that no matter how many times I listen to it, I've never
I
been
tried my
able to
best.
learn it.
I would sit there and like fake my way through it just to
Yeah.
be like, she'd be proud of me.
Yeah.
She would totally
I
love.
tried. I
She would
tried.
love that
Yeah.
I could kind of do what she does. Like she would really
100%.
like this. Yeah.
Such a great song. Just such a great song.
Mm-hmm.
So, I had to go to Amazon Music. All these other songs being played on Spotify, but this artist has a exclusive deal through Walmart and Amazon Music. I had to go to my country roots. I had to blame it all on my roots, really.
When you always you got to.
Got to because as in the early 90s especially, I rode with my dad mowing grass every day and in the summertime, and he was a strict, we're listening to 94.7.
That sounds like a country song in itself.
Yeah, 94.7, and that's all, QDR, that's all we're going to listen to. So my first taste of music in general was country.
Look, I don't care what anybody says. 90s country was lit.
Oh, for sure.
Nothing, 90s country is...
Somebody said that. I saw that the other day. It's like, okay, that's amazing Super Bowl. Give it next year, 90s country.
Well,
Like,
100%.
our producer Ricky even said, like, when they have the Super Bowl in Nashville, they didn't have all the classic country artists. perform
Yes.
for all us
Yes.
country music fans. So, but this is Garth Brooks puts on a great show. This is Friends in Low Places. I got friends in low places where the whiskey drowns and the beer chases my blues away. I hit that low note. And I'll be okay. Oh, that was good.
yeah, I've been practicing that for like years of my life. I didn't listen to a lot of country, but I watched movies where this was, and I was like, this is it. This is my moment.
So you imagine 6, 7-year-old Eric or any of us who listen
Oh,
to country
man.
music
Yeah.
singing about getting wasted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where the whiskey drowns and the beer chases
realize
our blues away.
that's
We
what it
had
was about.
no idea what it was about.
I was just like, yeah, he told her.
I mean, he literally has a
He's
line
got friends
in low places.
in everywhere. I don't even know what that means, but he's
I
got
don't
them.
even know what it means.
No, he's got them.
He's definitely got them, and people would. I don't know how they didn't freak out back then. They probably did, and we didn't realize it. But there's a line in the song where he mentions about being as high as that ivory tower
That's
that you're
right.
living in. Like, you can't mention
Right.
the word high.
Look.
Oh my
sure,
goodness!
Garth Brooks was ahead of his time in the
He
country
sure
music scene in the
was.
90s. Because if you've ever heard We Shall
We
Be Free,
shall be
my
free.
God, talk about a song that I can get real pumped up to.
Have a little faith. Hold out.
Ugh.
That's
I feel like
good.
this is our calling. Like, they're doing a lot of like emo concerts now where it's literally you rent out a place, have a DJ that's playing like all the emo stuff.
Oh, yeah.
This would be us just playing 90s hits like
I have a 90s country music playlist.
As do I.
Watermelon
We'll have-
Crawl, my jam.
we'll have a DJ party where we just come and we play music all night.
Other country
Have
music
pizzas.
songs that were under consideration but didn't make my list was Boot Scootin' Boogie by Brooks and Dunn. 'Cause way out, past the city
Yeah.
limit sign, there's always a honky tonk, Anyway, and then Should Have Been a Cowboy, Toby Keith. I disagree with his political
good.
stuff, but I love that song. So.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorites is the John Deere Green by Joe
Oh yeah,
Duffy.
Joe Diffie. Yep. Some good stuff. Country.
man.
We need to do just a music season and just talk about anyway. Getting off track. Ashby.
Okay. So
What you got for
I
us?
mentioned them when we were doing our breakdown of 90s music, that sort of like synth, they live in that synth life. I had never heard anything like this
Yes.
before. As like an 8-year-old, this would come on Mix 101.5 all the time. And I remember just being like, never have I ever heard anything sound like this.
Yes.
I feel like a DJ. Just,
Yeah.
I know, right?
I've got a DJ like little app on my iPad. I should have just brought that out and started just mixing it. Just
I mean, it's basically about this girl like moving on, and realizing she deserves more than she's been given in a relationship. But I had no clue because I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I loved it. I was like, I have no idea what's happening.
Did
This
you
is
hear?
amazing.
Did you hear? I saw the sign or the sun.
I heard I Saw the Sun.
I saw the sun.
Yeah,
and it
for
opened
sure.
up my eyes. I saw
For sure.
the sun.
And Ace of Base also, they were not a one-hit wonder. They had
No,
some good
yeah.
They
stuff.
had some pretty good stuff.
And also, like, lyrically questionable. Like, I had no idea, like, All That She Wants Is Another Baby. Like, that was a song that they put out. And I was like, what?
Definitely
She
a
wants
lyric.
baby?
Definitely a lyric that existed.
Yes,
So-
100%. But I was too young to be really aware of what my parents had been listening to. If I had, I would have understood that this came out of sort of like where before Ace of Base, people like the Eurythmics had been doing it. But
Sure.
I had no concept of the 80s synth scene. And so something like this hitting a pop music station that I listened to and hearing something like that for the first time with like snap beats and not actually having a drummer, just having like synth drums. None of that was on my radar. And so I just thought like, wow, I've never heard music sound like this before. And it definitely stuck with me. Like, I still really love synthy music.
Yeah. Not to go on a deep rabbit hole, but there's an amazing documentary out that Dave Grohl pretty much is the center of called Sound City, where they talk about this old studio where they recorded Nevermind, but it had been there for decades before with Tom Petty, all sorts of people up until more modern. But they briefly discussed that where before it had been all tape, you all play at the same time in the room right there together. And then there was a pushback when like computers came around. But then they have Trent Reznor from 9 Nails come in, and they talk about how he was one of the first people, like in that genre at least, using computers not to like erase what the history was, but instead to use it in more modern ways in this way. Same way like
Right.
synth sounds and different drums and different sounds that just you couldn't get out of instruments otherwise.
Right.
And it's neat to see how those type of things play forward now. I totally recommend that documentary. Go watch that.
Yeah.
But it's
Also,
the
the
same.
documentary on Netflix about the history of drumming, because it
Really?
talks about the same thing, where it's like the history of drumming from jazz to rock, and then basically how 80s bands sort of erased drummers because of the synth. Like, you could just have a
drum
those
pad.
pads, right? And then moving back into 90s grunge, you brought the drummer back in with bands like Nirvana and stuff. And so it's a really fascinating
Well,
documentary.
you're seeing it now too, like because for a long time, at least in the past 10 years, music got very heavily into electronic again. It may not necessarily sound like it, but you don't have musicians in the studio playing a lot of these things.
Right.
And I know like some people like her, some don't, but like Avril Lavigne was on an interview with Mark Hoppus the other day, and she was talking about that where this is finally an album that didn't do it under a record label. She didn't have any backing. She just got with Travis Barker, started making an album and some other people. She's like, this album actually has guitars on it again, and it has drummers. She's like, whereas the modern music hasn't had these type of things in a while. Like, we're bringing musicians back into this and making it what I want it to be. So it's cool to see like it's circling around again, where you're starting to hear real instruments all over again in mainstream music. You know, even though you have access to everything in the world now, but still,
Right.
it's there. My turn.
Your turn, Kyle.
Your turn.
This is an album that I didn't listen to as much as a child. I listened to certain songs, but it's an iconic album that changed a lot and inspired a lot of people. I know Katy Perry listened as one of her major things to even just get out of what she grew up doing to go out on her own and try to be a musician. But Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, the album was life-changing for a lot of people. It was you had a woman coming out, putting out very strong lyrics on very strong, real things.
This was the original Taylor Swift template.
Yeah, and some of it's even darker, like, for sure.
Right.
But yeah, for sure, like, coming out, not being afraid in the same way, not aiming to
Right.
be like, this is my radio song.
Right.
She's like, I'm putting out good music, but I'm going to put exactly what I want on it, and it is what it is. I chose Ironic. I think it's a fun song, especially music video. If you go and watch it, it's crazy a little bit, but it's fun to watch. But the whole album in general is just a life-changing type thing.
And see, I hadn't been playing I've been playing the music like kind of in the background while people are talking, and then like I'll turn the volume up whenever we get to, a point where you're done talking. It'll be around the chorus, whatever. But the intro to this is just
For sure.
we got to start from the beginning. So here we go. Ironic.
An old man turned 98. He won the lottery and died the next day.
It's good stuff. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit to get to the chorus.
Chardonnay.
It's just like, it's awesome to me, because especially with that one, it's just a straight up like rock song. It starts emotional and like kind of pretty and everything else. But same, we go listen to some of our other ones. It's still that same genre, but it's a very different like take on it. Like, yeah. And so there's so much that, like, I totally recommend, like, definitely, again, some serious topics that us as 90s kids had no clue what we were singing about. But, like,
Poor Uncle Joey.
yeah, that's about all we need to say about that one. Do your own digging.
Yeah.
Poor
yeah.
Dave Coulier.
Do your own research.
Yeah, do your own
Listen to You Oughta Know
half-baked internet
alone.
research there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good choice. Alanis Morissette is one of those mainstays on, we mentioned Mix 101.5, who, when we were growing up, originally their tagline was 80s, 90s, and today. Or no, 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Right.
And then as we got older, it was 80s, 90s, and today,
Right.
because there's not a, catchy...
I mean, just
You can't
like,
call it the aughts. We didn't call it
Right.
that back in the day, because
Right.
I didn't know what that meant.
and I consider how music finds you too, right? Because this song came out in 95. I was 7.
Sure.
And by the time I was 16 and I had my own car, I owned that album on a CD. I don't know where I bought it, when I bought it, why I bought it. I just know I bought it. And I ran around in my car listening to every song on that album, because they're all fire, at like top volume with the windows down, screaming my lungs out. The way that Alanis would have wanted a young girl to listen to it.
In this music video, she does
100%.
that.
She does it.
4 versions of herself, all in there
All
singing
in
And like
their own
every single song, like on that album, still like head over feet, you learn. Still, I will like if it comes on in the car, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs.
It's really good
I think that's
stuff.
an iconic, like that moment right there is a 90s thing. I'm sure it happens for everybody else, but for us in our generation, that's a 90s hit for us. If that comes on, you turn it up and just want to belt it at the top of your lungs, that's a hit of the 90s for yourself, I think.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of hits from the 90s, let's talk about Will Smith. Will Smith is one of those entertainment renaissance men who was very accomplished in the early 90s
Right.
with television, and then transitioned over to the movie industry. And all the while putting out music. And his early 90s music, as the Fresh Prince with DJ Jazzy Jeff, to me, it slaps still. But it's what you can kind of consider like cringe rap a little bit. Like it's very straight and on the arrow and like,
Right.
make sure you listen to your parents. Ha-ha! Just...
Will Smith ain't got a cuss in his records to sell them, but
well...
I do, so.
Starting...
Y'all know.
starting in the mid 90s, his stuff, became a little more hip hopish and a little more enjoyable to the masses. And we're gonna go with his first big hit of the mid 90s. This is Getting Jiggy With It. So it's I don't know. You hear it,
Go ahead and get the dance.
just go ahead and get your dance on. This was a staple at our middle school dances for sure.
Oh yeah.
Ha
On your mark, ready, set, let's go. Dance floor pro, I know, you know, I go psycho when my new joint hit. Just can't sit, gotta get jiggy with it. Who that fin it? Big Willie Styles all in it. Getting jiggy with it. Getting jiggy with it.
And then you also, of course, have the Weird Al parody where his is, I got jiggy with it.
Woo! Weird Al. Always making it weird.
Al, yes, always.
On brand.
But, just one of those songs, again, you hear it. It's 90s. And it makes you want to just start moving your hips, moving your shoulders a little bit, getting that little groove in your beat there. And you could be driving in the highway and you hear it and you just start nodding your head, just...
I'm being more and more convinced that we need to rent out a community building, have a DJ party, have a middle school dance for the 90s, and just play it and go have fun.
Yeah, for everyone in their mid to late 30s.
For sure. I'm not kidding. The whole emo thing is happening. There's a giant emo cruise about to happen now. We could at least, as a small town podcast, put on something like that.
I'm down. Whatever you
Dance
want to call
party.
it. Dance party. Yep. 90s dance party. So.
Okay. So my next one. This is another thing that I know I was surrounded with in the 90s, and it didn't become clear to me that it had seeped into my subconscious until later in life when I learned that I love this kind of music. But I was too young in the 90s to be listening to the Wallflowers, the Gin Blossoms.
Sure.
But you had some of those bands have breakthrough radio hits. And one of them was Third Eye Blind. And I remember they played this song ad nauseum on the radio
all the time.
and my mom and I would jam to it in
For
the
sure.
car. And then it wasn't until later
You realize
that I realized what it was
what you
about,
were
but it's
singing.
still a banger. We're not going to mention that one particular lyric.
Oh,
We're
my
just going to let it sit.
Baby, I want something else. I'm not listening when you say
This is a totally Kinley Pool song.
Yes.
100%. Yes.
We've talked about it a little bit in the past. That was 100% one of those songs. And Not Stealing Your Thunder. This was on my list, and I took it out only because I tried to cut my list down.
Fair.
But it's an album that I really didn't listen all the way through until in the past 10 years.
Right.
And again, you discover
Right.
oh wow, there's a lot of things here that I did
Yes.
not have any idea. I was
Yes.
belting at the top of my lungs.
Correct. Well,
But
because
still,
there's
it's an
that
amazing
part
album.
where you don't to be fair, it was a misheard lyric
Sure.
for me.
Mhm.
So even if I had listened to it correctly, I wouldn't have understood what it was talking about. But I didn't even hear it correctly.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I would just do that thing you do when you don't know the lyrics. You're like,
Mumble your way through
you know,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know what they were saying. And then later, when I actually looked up the lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what?
This is still a go-to album for me where I'm if I'm at work and I get
yeah.
a ton of orders, but I need to really just stop whatever and go to town entering, I will pull up this album, just Third Eye Blind is what it is, and
Yep.
just put it on YouTube or wherever else.
Right.
And just from top to bottom, it's an amazing album.
Yeah. Well, it's again, now that I'm older and I go back to certain types of music, I have playlists that fit my moods more than anything else. And Third Eye Blind, One Headlight by the Wallflowers, Jealousy by the Gin Blossoms, Found Out About You by the there is a certain string of radio hits by bands like that just take me back to a certain place.
For sure.
And now that I'm older, the sound of the song is what I remember.
100%.
But now that I'm older, I can also appreciate a lot of the lyrics because a lot of those bands were putting out really introspective, interesting things. And so I now realize that I'm a huge fan of that genre. And all of those sort of band like Oasis and stuff were
Sure.
coming out with things in the 90s that I'm only now really appreciating from a musical lyrical standpoint, but that got pushed to radio and blown up. And so they have these kind of hits that you can use to dive into their deeper tracks.
Them as a whole, all of the string of bands you just listed is something that makes your heart smile, almost it makes you jump, something in it, your heart just flutters almost a little bit, just to be if I was to pick a perfect soundtrack for a perfect time in my life, you're probably over, making it probably a lot better than it probably was either way. But it puts me at the Kinley Pool on the absolute best day ever with the best crew ever doing whatever.
Yeah.
In your mind, it's that was the best day of my childhood. That'd be the soundtrack. It's all of those strung right behind each other.
Absolutely. So in most music episodes, this is where we'd be done. But this
Not
is the
today.
90s.
Yeah.
9 on the 90s. You get
No.
5
That's
songs
right.
per podcaster. That's 15
Strap in.
total. We're going to stretch the limits of that little tape and try to get as much on there as we can.
Yeah, we are.
So, Kyle, take us home with number 4. Well, take us on. Not
Take us
home.
onward.
Take us onward with number 4.
Just in general, this group was completely different than anything I'd ever listened to growing up. And so it was just life-changing for me. Because the same way, I wasn't in a variety that listened to tons of hip-hop, anything else. But this was a crossover between rock and rap and hip-hop.
Yeah.
And so Sabotaged by the Beastie Boys, and just in general, the Beastie Boys. But once again, songs that I don't know all the words to, but I will hum at the top of my lungs, with the windows down to bit.
Yes.
That's just straight
yeah.
jamming, the bass lines, all these things,
Oh, yeah.
all their stuff is awesome anyway, but just that one in general for me just gets me pumped, especially if I'm driving on a back road.
Yeah. I love that was one of the musical cues for one of the recent Star Trek movies. I think it was the third J.J. Abrams Star Trek, like Beyond. Anyway, that was one of the musical cues for one of the like fight scenes. But I forget the technical term for music that only the viewer can hear, and music that's actually a part of the film that the people in the movie can hear. And it was one of the in scene. So like they're playing it on the bridge of the starship after they go into this battle, and like one of the dudes has picked it as like their fight song.
That is awesome.
And they're all like, great pick. And it just made me smile to think that like in the context of the film, it means that like 2,000 years from now when we're doing space travel, that the Beastie Boys catalog like made it.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
sure.
Like it's delightful to think of it.
Absolutely. Well, moving on to my next pick. We had to have a love song in here. There's so many great love songs. You know, I skipped over Casey and JoJo all my life. I skipped over All for One's I Swear. I left alone Into the Road by Boyz II Men. Could not.
I almost brought Celine in, but I didn't.
I mean, and honestly, that's a fantastic 90s song. I mean, My Heart Will Go On. It should be on this list, honestly. But
True.
We left it off. But Aerosmith from 1998, the Armageddon soundtrack. This is Don't Want to Miss a Thing. How many slow dances did we have?
So many.
In that North Johnston, now micro elementary school gym.
So many. Bubbles. I can see the bubbles
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
Just bubbles all around
6 inches, ladies and gentlemen.
Smoke.
Yep.
Reaching those arms out, barely touching that.
Leave room for Jesus.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, jump on in, y'all.
I don't want to close my eyes. I don't want to fall asleep, 'cause I miss you, baby. And I don't want to miss a thing, 'cause even when I dream, I get the sweetest dream I've never do. I still miss you, baby.
Oh,
and
man.
I don't want to miss
Steven
a thing.
Tyler. Woo. Old
Good
enough to be my
stuff.
grandfather.
Oh my goodness, but just so iconic, and just barely made the list here because it's where it's placed in the 90s, but it's definitely a 90s song, and it's definitely a peak 90s song.
Yeah.
I was sharing some previews of my list with some coworkers today, and they're like, "Well, of course you've got to have Don't Want to Miss a Thing on there." I was like, "Well, of course,
Well, of course.
of course." So,
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And in Ashby, you've got one that I feel like definitely has to be on here for.
I just want to say really quickly a fun fact about Aerosmith.
Yes.
Because this just came onto my radar like last year, the year before, because it was a trivia question. And it was Aerosmith's a really popular rock band, but they actually don't have a lot of accolades, like a lot of, like number one or whatever. And so they've been around since the 70s, but what a lot of people don't know is they were kind of like a rough and tumble, like biker band. Like you did not go see an Aerosmith concert unless you were like looking to get into, like it wasn't a safe environment to just like go see an Aerosmith concert in the 70s and 80s. They didn't have a number one hit until the 90s. Can you believe that?
That's insane.
That's tough
So
to
like
think.
Aerosmith got popular
Yeah.
by the definition of popular with this song. Like not until the 90s was Aerosmith like a really well
A
decorated.
thing, yeah.
Aerosmith
Man,
was the
crazy.
first live band I ever saw that I chose to go to on my own.
Right.
I still wasn't old enough. Me and Michael went with his parents because, thankfully, like you say, it spanned a generation where we could share this together. And I remember, I won't say names because I don't really know the name, but this drunk lady came up, and I was there, and she grabbed me, and we started dancing to Aerosmith on the lawn. And this is my first time ever at a concert. This is weird. It's awkward, but it's kind of like, this is amazing. This is, I'm like 12, 13 years old. The lady stops, looks at Michael's mom, and goes, Polly Thompson. So they knew who she was. I still to this day don't know what lady I was dancing with. But I could see that, especially going back and listening to older Aerosmith stuff. I can see where that falls into that.
I mean, they got onto the scene in the 80s with the Run DMC collab.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
And that
This
crossed
way.
a major
Yeah.
barrier with that, too.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Anyway, sorry. Continue. Am I next?
Yeah.
You are next.
What's my next one? I'm just kidding. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, again, I had to take it back to two things. One, pop, pure pop. Second thing, me listening to things that I knew nothing about. This is Barbie Girl by Aqua. It's, I don't know, should we give like a rating warning or something? Here it comes.
Here it comes.
Turn it down if you have kids in the car really quick.
It's your creation.
Yeah, 5 seconds ago.
Barbie, let's go party.
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world. Life in plastic.
So Aqua, not quite one-hit wonders.
Mm-hmm.
They had another more inappropriate song, if you can believe it, called Candyman.
It had amazing cover art though, and logo.
They had, like, I think of what No Doubt was to us.
Sure.
Like, the way that they stylized themselves. And I'm not taking away from their talent because they're a fantastic band. But the idea that your look really sold your vibe as
sure.
much as your music. Like for all of Aqua's, I mean, if you know, I'm not gonna, protect their talent like I would, No Doubt. It is what it is. It's synth pop, but they definitely understood having the look, right?
Sure.
Like their music videos and their look. I honestly, I haven't done any research. I know nothing about the band Aqua. But I had the Barbie Girl CD. I don't know how I got it. If through no other reason than my parents had no idea what they were buying for me, because I don't know if they actually cussed. So I don't think they had to have an explicit warning. I think it was just all very thinly veiled,
subtle references, metaphoric, yeah.
And so I think that because the cover was like these, like a bombshell bottle blonde and some dudes dressed in weird things in front of like a pool background. Yep. I think my parents probably thought it was like some Disney Channel pop.
This is like your CD.
Right. And they bought it from me.
Well, same way, like the single is Barbie Girl. Like, and so again, I don't think our parents really listened too much to what deep into the lyrics of
They're
things.
Singing
either.
about Barbies. That's so good for
right.
my
And to
9-year-old.
this day, I did no background on the band. I don't know where they're from. I just remember this song was a part of my childhood.
The same way, like Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. Like, same iconic album, bright green with a purple baby on front.
I played Tub Thumping today in class, and then I heard the lyric, like, whoa, can't play that. Never mind.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
We are no longer pissing the night away, guys.
My mom was listening to me listen to that. She did have a problem with that because I remember her, because they would play it on Mix 1.5.
For sure.
I mean, it was a huge radio hit. And she would turn it down. I'm like, Mom, I love this song. And she's like, we are not
You
listening
take a
to
whiskey
that.
drink.
They
You
say
take a lager
piss.
drink. You take songs that remind you of the good times. You take songs that remind you of the best times.
It's such a good song.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Anyway,
That's a one-hit one. That'll make the one-hit wonders
so
episode.
go listen to Barbie Girl. And then if you're feeling adventurous, listen to Candyman by Aqua.
All right. We're in the short rows here, Kyle. Take us home.
Last one. This one goes right in that string of artists that Ashby talked about earlier. Puts me right there at Kinley Pool. I picked one before. Champagne Supernova is an amazing song that I feel like puts me right at the Kinley Pool. This is another one that's just historic, that goes on forever. And again, an amazing album by a band that we don't know a ton about until they came around, but Oasis. What's the Story? Morning Glory is the album. First off, amazing album name, but Wonderwall is a song that just generation after generation is put in so many movies. There's jokes, memes, everything about this song, but it's just an awesome song.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you. By now, you should have somehow realized what you gotta do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now.
Something that hit me big too is like, I've thought about the Goldbergs TV show before, and I love that show because it reminds me of like a more modern Wonder Years for us. He has a moment, I think, with his girlfriend and his friends where he kind of like screws things up, and he comes and puts together, like you would back in the day of some sort, like a video collage of his friends and like showing like his love for them. And in the midst of doing this is the song he chooses as the background music, and it's like, that's 100% me, especially at a younger age. Like, this would be something I would pick to be like, if I'm showing something emotional about me and my friends and how I love them, I'm going to pick this song.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't necessarily because of the lyrics or anything. It's just that emotional feeling that the simpleness of that song gives you.
It's also like, I think, one of the more beautiful lyrics on summing up what it feels like to have a crush.
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like in this moment, I've always loved that song.
And I feel too like we've talked about it a little bit, but we're growing up with this, especially towards the later end of the 90s, where we're starting to like develop feelings and become teenagers.
Right.
Like, so we're starting to have these moments of, Mom and Dad, you don't understand.
Right. That, like these deep feelings that seem like no one else is having them. No one else has ever felt like this.
Yep.
Like, I'll never not feel like this.
Yep.
And we had songs that you could like dance around to and like get pumped up to. But we also needed songs that we could just lay
100%.
on the floor, on our back, in our room and listen to and just like try to keep ourselves contained within our body.
Just exist in that moment of that.
Right. Like just try to keep all these big feelings I'm feeling inside myself, you know? And that's one of those songs, I think, that helps you contain your emotions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Man.
Well, this next song, I struggled, with picking this last song, and I always kept coming back to the song that I ended up picking. But some songs that missed out on this were "No Diggity" by Blackstreet, "Rosa Parks" by Outkast, "Nothing But a G Thing" by Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. Just
Some good ones.
"Don't Speak" by No Doubt was a contender here. I had it
Man.
typed in at one point this afternoon. But this is very much a recency bias pick, and which is hilarious because these are 90s songs. But I heard this song not open the Super Bowl halftime show, or the Nooper Knoll halftime show.
The Looper Show.
Yeah, on
The Ball Network television show.
on Sunday. But it was like the second song played, and it just got me. It took me back to just the first time I heard this song. And again, I grew up. Let's just play it. I mean, this
Yeah,
is
man.
This is Tupac. This is Dre. This is Roger. This is California Love. So I grew up listening, like I mentioned earlier, to a bunch of country music, and country music's great. But as I got into my middle school years and my high school years, I was slowly discovering this new genre of hip hop, rap, R&B, and the halftime show this past Sunday was just it was like it was a love song written to the part of me that just loves that music. I co-opted a phrase from Propaganda, the Christian rapist spoken word poet, where he says, I just know the gospel and good hip hop, and that's that sums up me pretty well, in a nutshell. I know the gospel and good hip hop, and a bunch of random TV quotes, but this song, it's beautiful. I mean that's the only way to really describe it to me is you hear it, it transports you in time. I mean, you start nodding your head, and I could listen to it all day. I mean, It was always going to come back to this song. This song has to be on this list. Hip hop in the 90s, to me, this song representing that whole genre. You couldn't have another song that represented hip hop. You could have had Gangsta's Paradise, yeah. You could have any of the songs I mentioned earlier, Steel DRE. All of those would have been fantastic representatives, but this one stands well above them. And I was reminded of it this past Sunday watching that halftime show, just how lucky and blessed we were to have this song.
I just remember the first time I ever heard this song, and probably Gangsta's Paradise, and just thinking like, well, that's different.
Yeah.
Like never heard that before.
We were watching the Nuber Lowell at our house the other day, and Erica, we were watching the halftime show of the Nuber Lowell, and Erica, this song came on, and she started for sure dancing on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Especially and that she has that connection where she lived in California for a year or more, and it's that connection she made with friends. But it's being in that place again, even at an older time period when this, but you're like, I'm here. This is the song from my childhood. I now think of friends and these memories and these moments, current time, because of the song here. And so it was just awesome to see that experience from her.
For me, it was exposure to a whole new world.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, because, forgive me for saying this, but it's the truth. Growing up listening to nothing but country, that's 99% a bunch of old white guys. You got your, And this opened up the world to other people, other culture, other points of view. I mean, just more than just what the box that I was raised in and grew up in. It opened my eyes to a whole new world of different types of music, different types of people, different different backgrounds, just so many wonderful things that this life is worth learning about and living for. Because life is more than just our experiences. It's everyone's experience. And this song was a gateway for that for me, where I can hopefully maybe not experience, someone else's life, but I can at least see it and try to understand it and try to become privy to it. So like I said, it opened doors for me, and it got me out of my one room house that, metaphorically I'd built for myself, where this is what I know and this is all that matters. And it opening me up to so much more. So sorry to go on that rant, but it was important.
It's completely important.
Yeah.
So Ashby, take us home.
So I feel like this is a very iconic 90s song. I feel like every single girl who I was growing up with at the time would have been able to belt it out. It also just happens to be about growing up and moving on, and I appreciate it even more when I went away to college. But Dixie Chicks, Wide Open Spaces.
Who doesn't know what I'm talking about? Who's never left home? Who's never struck out? A young girl's dreams no longer hollow. It takes the shape of a place out west. But what it holds for her, she hasn't guessed. She needs wide open spaces, room to make a big mistake. She needs new faces.
So I'm realizing as I grow up how varied my parents' musical tastes were, and I think that also helped inform a lot of my varied musical taste. And my parents were, they were in college in the early 80s, and so they were obviously big into what we would, again, consider classic rock. But when I was growing up, they were listening to a lot of 90s country. And I didn't really realize, my dad had Garth Brooks albums, Shania Twain. And so when Dixie Chicks came along, I remember Wide Open Spaces was one of the first albums that I ever owned. Maybe even before I got into like the boy bands and Britney Spears and stuff. And so I really loved Dixie Chicks, or as they now are called, the Chicks. And they're talking about like putting something on that makes you feel good. I have a 90s country playlist, and it has Wide Open Spaces and There's Your Trouble, You Were Mine. I really just loved their vibe, and again, would consider them a girl band.
Sure.
They even played their own instruments, right?
That's true. And Earl had to die. There's
and
no other
also,
option.
like, definitely one of the top murder ballads of all time.
For sure.
Got to give credit where credit's due. Fantastic music video as well.
I love that. That's a thing. Murder ballads.
Oh, yeah. Murder ballads are definitely a thing. Warrant had one. Anyway. I'm very big into the history of murder ballads for obvious reasons.
Well, we are running out of time here. Do y'all want to hit them with some of the songs that didn't make your list but were contenders for your list?
I have a giant list, but I can speed run it.
Go for it. Speed run.
I'll just preface this by saying I may actually duplicate some that you guys chose and made the list, but I'm going to go fast. Nearly at least half of these made my list and ended up squeakingly coming off just barely. First off, Smash Mouth All-Star was the first song I put on my list, and I had to take it away. The Verb, Bittersweet Symphony, same way. Put it on, amazing, I had to take it off. Natalie and Bruglia, Torn is another amazing 90s song.
Oh, man.
The Offspring, The Kids Aren't Alright, was on there really for a long time. It's one of my favorite songs of all time, but it felt a little bit too much like we talked about earlier, the late 90s into the 2000s vibe of my life, so I left it off. No Doubt, Don't Speak, Third Blind, Semi-Charmed Life, Radiohead, Creep, Soundgarden, Black Hole Sun, Counting Crows, Colorblind, A variety of songs by them. Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You.
Yes.
Cranberries, Linger. Aerosmith, you already said that one. I don't want to sing. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Scar Tissue, Under the Bridge, Californication. Tony Braxton, Unbreak My Heart. Coolio, Gangsta's Paradise. Lynn, Still My Sunshine is an amazing
man.
1999.
Yeah, Sublime, Santeria. Wilson Phillips, Hold On. Sugar Ray, Fly, Every Morning. You already kind of somewhat mentioned Wallflowers, One Headlight. House of Pain, Jump Around. Weezer, Say It Ain't So. Spin Doctors, Two Princes. Sixpence None the Richer, Kiss Me.
Kiss Me, yeah.
Shania Twain, Man, I Feel Like a Woman. Spice Girls, Wannabe, you got that one. Hanson, Mbop. Notorious B.I.G., More Money, More Problems. Dre, Nothing But a G Thing. Cher, Believe, was a huge 91s for us music video people. CNC Music Factory, Everybody Dance Now from Jock Jams, if you ever lived that
Jock
life.
Jams.
And then Tag Team, Whoop, there it is.
Yes, of course.
From Almighty
Nice.
Ducks and just in general sports teams. So
All right, well, I'm going to speed run mine, and then Ashby, you can mention some of yours. But Baby Got Back by Sir Mix-a-Lot.
Sure.
I Want It That Way, Backstreet Boys. I mentioned Rosa Parks by Outkast, Nothing But a G Thing, Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, No Diggity by Blackstreet, Don't Speak, No Doubt. Say My Name, Destiny's Child, 99. TLC's Scrubs, another 98, 99 hit. Kiss from a Rose by Seal, Tearing Up My Heart by NSYNC, and of course, I'm a Genie in the Bottle, Christina Aguilera.
So I would like to give a shout out to some of the songs on Now 1 and Now 2, which are the
Oh,
nows that
amazing.
came
Yes.
out in the 90s and which I played over and over and over again until I scratched them.
sure.
So you have Together Again by Janet Jackson. You have The Way by Fastball. Amazing
song.
If You Could Only See by Tonic, another one of those
Oh,
bands.
100%.
Anytime by Brian Knight. You had Never Ever by All Saints. You remember All Saints?
I do.
Anyway, Fly Away, Lenny Kravitz, and then also on that are some, Backstreet, Spice Girls, Hanson, all those wonderful things that we'll talk about in another episode. You Get What You Give, the New Radicals, where they
Yes,
basically
amazing.
called out a ton of 90s artists like Beck and Hanson. And then also U2 was doing some stuff in the
sure.
90s. They had Sweetest Thing. So they had some hits out.
Oh, you two had one come out in the early 90s?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent song.
Also had, oh my goodness, what was the With or Without You? 93, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. And then Sheryl Crow was also doing some
sure.
interesting
Sheryl
things
Crow,
in the
yeah.
90s. My Favorite Mistake. That was really good. Closing Time, Semisonic.
100%.
Sonic,
Yep.
yep.
Oh, such a good song.
That's what we'll close our party out with.
100%. And then
We haven't mentioned Blues Traveler.
Blues Traveler.
Is
Yeah.
Run
And
Around.
Spin Doctors.
Spin Doctors.
My claim to fame is that
Hootie and the Blowfish.
Chris Barron of the Spin Doctors has retweeted on Twitter a
snap.
picture of my cat because he's a huge cat fan.
Nice.
So
We'll invite him
yeah.
to the party. See
I
if he
have
shows
like
up.
a 1 degree separation from the Spin Doctors. I'm just saying.
Very nice.
Little Miss can't be wrong over here. And then we also didn't talk about Cake
No.
and Fatboy Slim.
Man.
So anyway, those are just some I threw out.
One
Just
more out there too
So
is
good.
Green Day's album Dookie came
Yes.
out, and it was like life changing forever because like when I
time
come
of
around,
your life.
yeah, all these different songs off that album.
God.
that-
97.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blink-182 came out in the mid 90s too, or at least like the main ones, like all the small thing stuff we hit, but the same way. Again, I kind of slid it to the other end because it's not quite what I think of when I think of 90s, but
Right.
there's tons of amazing things that happened in the late 90s, especially for us. That didn't make this list, but I think iconic 90s, you throw it back to those other.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, well, we got to get out of here, folks. Big thank you to Ricky Lyles for his contributions to our podcast and our lives. We hope that you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did and that you're as pumped for the rest of this journey into the 90s as
What's
we
up?
are. So,
Make 7.
before we leave, why don't y'all hit them up with some last-minute plugs? Ashby?
I'm Ashby Brame. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Ashby Gray. I'm really into binging, DC, Marvel currently on, the Star Wars thing and what's going on over at Disney Plus with the MCU. So just listen to me rant about stuff. They're making a Teen Wolf movie this year, so you'll hear me talk about that. That's where I'm at.
All right, Kyle?
I'm on Instagram _live_bright_. Honestly, most of my stuff are pictures of my daughter or my wife, but also some
your
other
cars.
times. I don't really do much. I will be if I buy another car. Sure, I don't have one right now, but other than that, I've tried to sometimes just post stuff from nostalgic things that just remind you of things that you just kind of have those happy moments. I think it's good to throw stuff out there every once in a while.
And I'm Eric Creech. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at EricOMac15. You can check out my daily Wordle score.
I hate you for getting me into Wordle.
You're welcome. Also, just want to give a shout out to a podcast that inspired this episode, 60 Songs That Explain the 90s through The Ringer. Just going to give its description. You can check it out on Spotify. But the 1990s were a turning point in music with the increasingly connected world enabling an unprecedented coalescence of various styles and genres. The decade featured the rapid evolution of sonic artistry and subsequently shaped the soundscape of the eras that follow. Listen along as The Ringer's preeminent music critic Rob Harvilla curates and explores 60 iconic songs from the 90s that define the decade. So
You
go
could say
check.
the 90s were like a time when music pivoted.
Yeah.
Pivot.
It was the
Pivot!
That's a friendly. That's a
That's a
friendly
friend-
thing to say over there.
Yep. Apex Mountain there. We should pivot. Thanks for joining us. Join us next week for our discussion on the X-Men animated series. Stay as cool as the other side of the pillow. This phrase probably originated in the 90s.
Probably.
Thank R.I.P. Stuart Scott.
There it is.
We'll see you next time, folks. Have a good night.
Bye.
What the what?